I want to refer everybody to a wonderful editorial that Hugh Mackenzie of the CCPA, not of the Nova Scotia branch, but of the National, wrote for the Toronto Star, and it's called, "Can We Have an Adult Conversation About Taxes?" So just go there and read it. It's fantastic. It's something that nobody has ever said, but makes a lot of sense. Mathieu and I have been working on what I think is a sort of a long-term project on the growing gap in Nova Scotia, and it's part of a CCPA larger project nationally called the Growing Gap. And so the presentation here is going to consist of three parts. First of all, productivity versus earnings in Nova Scotia, 1981 to 2006. And I'll be going through the highlights of a paper that we published almost exactly a year ago. I've given handouts, so I'm going to be going through it quickly because it's already available. But I wanted to mention it because the second part is something this is work just in progress now that we're doing, which is which groups are getting how much of the economic pie. And of course, what we show is that some groups are dropping in terms of their share of the economic pie, while a very few are growing. And I think our figures go back to 76, not just 1981. And finally, just a little bit very, very new material that I've just been working on, and that is how have trade unions been faring? How have unionized workers been faring in the last 30 years? Okay, so a very brief overview of the paper we did a year ago, Hardworking Province, Is It Enough? Rising Profits and Falling Labor Shares in Nova Scotia. So I do it as a series of questions and answers. First question, has Nova Scotia gotten richer or poorer in the past 25 years? You know, if you go to governments, whether it's Conservative or NDP, they'll always say, you know, we used to be able to afford things like Medicare, but it's becoming increasingly harder. We just don't have the money. Well, Nova Scotia has gotten 62.5% richer in, if we measured in GDP per capita in the last 25 years. So we're definitely much better off. We are wealthier as a province. And the bigger increase was from 1997 to 2006. So a big increase in the wealth that we could be sharing, but we're not. To what can we attribute this growth in provincial wealth? Well, much of it's due to a 37% increase in real productivity measured in output per worker hour, and again, a steeper rise since the mid-90s. So, of course, what we're leading up to is, gee, I wonder how that compares to how workers are doing. Because if we're measuring productivity in output, that is GDP per worker hour, how are workers doing? You can see there's a 39% increase in productivity in Nova Scotia, a little around the same as the national increase in productivity. So if productivity rose by 37%, how did the average Nova Scotian's earnings do? Well, they fell from 1977. You'll see in the period previous to 1977, and you'll see this is discontinuous because Statistics Canada does not keep the same set of figures, but we can work with that, and we have. But you notice till 1977 there was an onward and upward increase in labor's share of in average real earnings, and then from 1977, to put it very bluntly, there's been a class war going on in which the side that does the employing is winning and the side that does the working is losing. But let's look at that even closer from 1999. Despite some blips upwards and downwards, the trend line shows that average real earnings have been falling from 1991 at the same time as you saw a rising economic tide, and basically the rising tide swamped the small boats. How do Nova Scotian earnings compare to those in other provinces? Well, we're the second lowest, have been the second lowest and this was measured at April 2007. How have earnings compared to productivity? You can see the productivity line, you can see the earnings line. Basically, productivity has increased by about 15% from 1991, and average real earnings have dropped by 5%. In other words, at a time in which productivity has risen by 15% in the province, the average worker's real earnings have dropped. We're poorer now on average than we were in 1991. Is that the way it's supposed to be? No, that's not the way it's supposed to be. If you look at the chart from 1983, and you could go back any number of decades, and what you'd see is that earnings basically follow productivity with a bit of a lag. That's the way it is supposed to be, that when factories and workplaces are becoming more productive, capital gets some of it and workers also get some of it with a bit of a lag. But you'll see what's happened is since 1991, those two lines that used to be roughly together have come apart and are heading off in different directions. And just to repeat the chart that we showed before, if our average earnings have fallen during a period of prosperity, where did the money go? I think you figured this out already. Matthew is the methodologist here, and he and Ellen Russell devised this methodology, which they applied in a paper on the national situation, and which we simply applied to Nova Scotia. If you divide the GDP increases between the labor share, that is working people, and those making profits, you can see that labor share has steadily dropped since 1991, and the profit share, in other words, capital's share, has risen. So I'll let you read this, but when we do this presentation, we say to people, okay, so why should we be concerned about this? And of course, there are social reasons, there's economic reasons, and there's a bunch of policy alternatives that follow from that.